introduce, and I'm really excited to talk to this gentleman, Omer Bartov. He is an Israeli-American Holocaust expert. His new piece in the New York Times is titled, "I'm a Genocide Scholar. I know it when I see it." We will link to that piece below. Mr. Bartov, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. I want to start just, your title is very provocative, and the term genocide is one that I can tell you on the cable side was very dicey to use when it comes to what's happening in Gaza. When you look at what Israel is doing in Gaza, do you, as so many activists do, view that as a genocide or an attempted genocide?
Yes, this was really one reason that I wrote this piece, to say that there's no other way of understanding what we are seeing now in Gaza than as an attempt to make life impossible for the population of Gaza to live there, to completely eradicate it as a group, which doesn't mean that you have to kill everyone. It means that you have to make it impossible for it to survive as a group. And that's been carried out systematically by the IDF now for months and months and months.
And does the rhetoric of people like Mr. Smotrich and Mr. Ben-Gvir, in which they have made pretty open declarations that they want to recolonize Gaza, they want to remove the Palestinians, they need to go somewhere else. You've heard Benjamin Netanyahu say the same thing, or referring to the occupied West Bank as Judea and Samaria, and talking about the Amalek, which in the Bible means wipe out all the people, kill their oxen, kill their calves, and that sort of language. Is it the rhetorical piece that, for you, seals the deal that this is an attempted genocide of Palestinian people?
Well, actually, it's a combination. So already after the massacre by Hamas on October 7th, many people with executive authority in Israel, politicians and generals, made statements that had the genocidal content. They spoke, among other things, about people in Gaza as human animals. So they dehumanized them. They said, we're going to flatten it. They won't have any water. They won't have any food. And over time, yes, people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir have talked openly about their desire to ethnically cleanse the entire land from the Jordan, from the river to the sea, including Gaza and the West Bank, of course. And they actually would like to make it into a religious state, into a halachic state. So their sort of cast of mind is not that different from that of Hamas on the other side. But what you need to see is a connection between this rhetoric and actions on the ground, because rhetoric can be also only rhetoric. And that's why when I heard those things in October, I said, well, it sounds genocidal, but is the IDF actually doing that? And for that, you need to identify a pattern of operations. And it was, for me, around May of 2024 that I concluded that the pattern of operations was actually intended to carry out those intentions that was already expressed right after the massacre by Hamas, to make it impossible to live in Gaza. And as we know now, they are talking about creating a so-called humanitarian city. What does that mean? That's one of the euphemisms that are often used in operations like that. It means some kind of cross between a concentration camp and a ghetto. People could go in. They're speaking initially of 600,000 Palestinians who would be moved from the beach area to which they had pushed them to a tent city to be built over the ruins of the city of Rafah, which has been completely ruined. And then they would be able to go in, but they won't be able to come out unless they leave the Gaza Strip altogether. And that would be a pilot for the rest, or all that's left of the 2 million Palestinians who would be concentrated there under conditions that would make it maybe both impossible for them to live, and maybe the world will take pity on them and take them elsewhere.
You know, when you talk about the idea of eradicating these people, making it impossible for them to live, I think about the fact that it feels quite deliberate, that the things that have been targeted, just the infrastructure that's been targeted, pretty much all the mosques, the churches, the museums, the antiquities, the schools, you know, all of the stuff that makes a society, as you said, not just a group of people, but a society, essentially erasing the kind of physical legacy of Palestinians having been in Gaza. And then you see similar things happening on the West Bank, where generations old farms are simply being occupied by strangers who come up, knock on the door, and say, "This is mine, and you have to leave, or you'll be killed." And so it is that sort of physical. It's very visceral. And I wonder for you, as a scholar in this, and as somebody who is Israeli American, how does that hit you? That people who have experienced this in Europe, it feels like they are perpetrating it on another people.
Well, look, I think that for every human being, whoever you are, if you're Jewish or not, if you're Palestinian or not, if you're from that region or not, when you see, especially what is happening in Gaza, just the sheer destruction of lives, first of all, of the 17,000 children, when you see that, and of course the Israeli public is spared all of that, it's not shown on Israeli TVs, just as a human being, first of all, it's simply shocking. And it's going on and on. It's not one day, 1 week, 1 month. It's going on and on. As an Israeli, it's particularly difficult for me, of course. First, because I grew up in that country. I served in the army of that country. My father was a dedicated Zionist and fought in what Israelis call the War of Independence, for the creation of the state after he fought against the Nazis in Europe. For me to see that country become what it has become now, the distortion of the very concept of Zionism, making it into a racist, Jewish supremacist ideology, is shocking. Absolutely. And then what is maybe even more disturbing for me personally is the extent to which the majority of the Israeli public, I'm not talking about the extremists who may be a third of the population, but the reasonable people in the center, on the left, have become completely indifferent, do not want to know about what's going on in Gaza. As for the West Bank, on the West Bank, what you see is a creeping ethnic cleansing. There are 3 million people there. Tens of thousands have already been displaced. There's a series, every week there's a pogrom. On October 7th, there were people who said October 7th was a pogrom. Of course, it was not a pogrom, because a pogrom is an action by a majority population against a minority, and the majority is supported by the state. So it was not a pogrom, it was an act of terrorism. But what is happening on the West Bank on a weekly basis are pogroms by settlers, abetted by the military that is supposed to protect the population there. And some of those military are actually settlers who are put into uniforms. They are recruited to the army, and now they're soldiers. And they carry arms. And they attack communities. And they're beginning with the rural communities. The idea is to take over the land, to push those people into the cities. And then maybe we can also start moving them out of the cities.
I want to bring you to the United States for a moment, because as you were speaking, particularly in your first answer, you talked about the idea of making a place unlivable for the people that you want to remove, and making their lives so hellacious and so terror-filled that they choose to leave on their own, and that they will even go into a ghetto if they have to, or go into internment. In this country right now, it feels like a lot of that is what's being done to non-white immigrants. That there's this idea that they are worthy of being harmed, that they are, to Donald Trump's term, poisoning the blood of our country. They are vermin. They are all criminals. 10 million some odd maybe people are all criminals. They're cannibals, he has depicted them as. And so therefore, they can be rounded up on the streets by masked men. They can be sent to what I cannot describe as anything other than concentration camps in places like Florida. For you, as a genocide scholar, is that language appropriate to call what they're calling Alligator Alcatraz in Florida, for instance, a concentration camp?
No, look, I mean, this began with Trump, when he was first running for president. He started using this language. I mean, he might have used it before too, but he was using it now as a presidential candidate. And he was speaking of a particular group of people as not exactly like us. They're not really human. They are thieves, they're robbers, they're rapists, and so forth. They walk around with baseball bats. They are not like us. And therefore, just as you see in Israel vis-a-vis Palestinians, they don't deserve the same rights. In fact, they don't deserve any right because they're not really human and they're not part of the sort of circle of solidarity that he defines, of course, in a particular way. It's better if they're white. It's better if they're blonde. It's better if they come from North Europe. So it isn't only the people in America, but he has those particular targets in America. And then what do you do with people like that if they're not like us? If they don't really have a right to have rights, then what's the problem about just picking them up and putting them in a concentration camp and making it impossible for them, so bad to live there that they will beg to be thrown out of the country? That's the whole intent.
Yeah. And it feels like what is being done on the right in this country is tied to a fear, which is the fear that by 2042, maybe 2045, this country will no longer have a white majority. And it's interesting the ways in which you're seeing people on the right start to say that more openly, to start to talk about the demographic mix, to pine for the 1924 Immigration Act, which was literally an attempt to freeze the racial mix of the country to the year 1890, I believe it was. And you're starting to just hear, J.D. Vance say that the people who have a true claim on citizenship are much more likely people the ADL would call neo-Nazis and fascists and people who fought on the southern side of the Civil War. They've got a real claim, but immigrants don't. And, just believing in the Constitution doesn't give them a claim. When you hear the kind of language that we're hearing on the American right, does it echo the kind of things that Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, and Bibi Netanyahu are saying in your view?
It echoes what they say, and unfortunately it echoes much more than that, because this talk about demography, that demography is destiny. Nationalism started talking about that long ago. That is that we want more people of our kind and fewer people of the other kind. We are the majority, we don't want the minority. That's what a nation state is made of. The United States is actually an exceptional case compared to European nationalism, because the United States was built on the idea that people can come from anywhere and they become American. That's what made the United States so special. For people like me who came from Israel, it actually made it totally different. I was seen for what I was doing, for what I could contribute, not for my color or my religion or anything like that. But yes, once you start thinking in those terms, then you are making demography into destiny, into identity, and you start thinking, and I have to say, in truth, there was democratic talk among the Democratic Party about, okay, this country will become a minority-majority country, and then we'll be okay. Then they'll all vote for us. There's no reason why minorities of one kind or another, when they become majorities, will like you. They may have their own opinions. This was in Israel. People talked about demography in Israel long before Netanyahu, long before Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. In the Labour Party in Israel, people spoke about the demographic bomb, that there would be suddenly more Arabs than Jews. What are we going to do? Well, it turned out that the Palestinians living in Israel realized that if they have fewer children, they can have a better life. Mm-hmm. And so their birth rate actually dropped, whereas Israel started supporting the ultra-Orthodox, who have now an average of 12 or 13 children per family. So you have now a vast number of very poor, not well-educated, ultra-religious people, but the numbers are fine. So this notion of demography as determining what will happen, I hear people in Israel, this was before the war, were telling me, well, we've lost, because now the ultra-Orthodox are going to be the majority. And for us, secular people, liberal people, we have no hope. And I said, how do you know what the children are going to be like? You have no idea. Right. I mean, my children are not like me. My grandparents were ultra-Orthodox. Mm-hmm. So this notion, this obsession with categorizing people and thinking that then you can somehow determine the fate of a nation is basically based on ideology and on prejudice.
Indeed. My final question to you, sir, is what is your advice on getting people to care? Because One of the things the right has done very well, I think, in Israel, as you've described, the population being shielded from it, they don't see the worst of the worst. But in this country, a lot of cases they do. They're very deliberately broadcasting the harm being inflicted on old, Latina women and cooks and dishwashers and people who work in fields, and they want it to be seen. They're sending not Dr. Oz. They're sending I can't remember what one of the TV hosts to go out with them to broadcast it. They want it to be seen. Kristi Noem practically broadcasts it. She wants people to see it. Dr. Phil is the person they're sending to go along and broadcast it. So they want it to be seen. They're putting memes up that are incredibly cruel with music under the snatchings and the kidnappings. How do you break the cycle of unconcern when that kind of content is being pumped into the right wing in this country?
It's very hard. In truth, it's very hard. And there have been regimes in the past that did exactly that actually, fascist regimes, when they created concentration camps, they didn't hide them. They showed them. They said, this is what we do. And they talked about them as re-education camps, right? We'll take homosexuals and make them into real men, right? We'll take the work shy and teach them how to work, because work liberates, and so forth. So it was actually broadcast. How do you change that? It's very hard, but I think that part of it has to do, and I think that's a sort of larger question about American politics, it's also in the United States and in Israel, is that by and large, political elites in this country have lost touch with much of the population. So you have now a kind of Trumpist right that has found a demagogy, a populist way of attracting people who feel that they were left behind. And they do that also by turning them against others. They say the reason that you're not doing well, the reason that you don't have a job or a good job, is because there are all these foreigners. And if we get rid of the foreigners, you'll be fine. But of course, they won't be fine because the money is not going to them. The money is going to the super rich. The Democrats lost touch with that too. They forgot the message that they actually were supposed to be the party of the working class. And they thought, as I said before, okay, all these minorities will start supporting us when no, they won't. There's no reason. If you don't pay attention to them, they won't vote for you. And you see that in Europe, the same kind of populism in France, in Italy, in Britain, in Germany. People feel that social democrats in the European context have left them behind. They're happy just to be political elite and to spout all this rhetoric, but not to do anything about it.
Yeah, it is the problem. And one of the things, I'm so glad that you said that, because I think a lot of the times Americans believe that the things happen here are completely exceptional and don't happen everywhere. But the same exact sort of dynamics happening in Israel, throughout Europe, in Central and South America, and in the United States, and in, South Africa fought back, but, we've now got their Afrikaners. So I guess that's how that goes. Omer Bartov, you're so great. Thank you so much. The piece is called "I'm a Genocide Scholar. I Know It When I See It." It's in the New York Times. We're going to put a gift link in the links below so that you all can read it, and hope you will avail yourselves of doing that. Mr. Bartov, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Joy.
Thank you. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe. Share this channel. Make sure that everybody subscribes to the YouTube channel. 70% of people are lurking, watching these shows and not subscribing. Why would you do that? So make sure that you like, subscribe, and throw some comments. And thank you all for joining the Joy Reid Show. See you on the next one. And goodbye for now.